Okay, and we will start once again with my introduction, and I'll jump over to you. So 5. Hello everyone, this is Carter Wetzel with Into the Interchain, presented to you by Shade Protocol, where we like to feature founders and projects, get their stories in front of you, the Cosmos community. Today I have a very special guest. We have Ron here. Ron, love to just look into the camera. Who are you? What's your background? What project are you representing? Just a little bit about your story of how you got into Web3.
Awesome. Well, thanks a ton, Carter. Really happy to be here, and this is super exciting. This is actually my first public appearance of any sort talking about Duality.
Wow.
So it's really an honor to be talking to you about this. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and kind of my story into Web3. The caveat, and I think like a lot of other founders, I'm pretty young. I just graduated from college, and and it was pretty busy while I was in college, but mostly in traditional tech world. So I was a product manager at a bunch of kind of later stage unicorn startups. I spent some time at Microsoft. I actually had a SaaS company while I was in college that I scaled up. We bootstrapped it to profitability and sold it about a year and a half ago. And honestly, at some point, I kind of got bored of traditional tech. I think that a lot of the problems there are solved. A lot of what we see there is relatively certain and clear and what the future looks like. And I asked myself kind of what's the next frontier that I think that was really interesting and exciting to look at. So coming into my senior year, I found this distributed systems professor of mine at Princeton and asked him kind of what are the next things I should be looking at. And he was already deeply crypto pilled. He said you should be looking at crypto. And he actually just raised $150 million for his startup. So he's very much in the ecosystem. And he's like, you should be looking at crypto. And so he and I actually put together a little independent study course with that we did together, which was frankly just an excuse to read white papers and build stupid products. And that was my intro into crypto and Web3. And I was like, this is really cool. Like I could think about this stuff all day. This is fascinating. There's all these technological problems and economic problems and governance problems and political things. And if this thing works, it's a huge deal. It's a really big deal. And then actually kind of, it spiraled from there. This was the peak of the bull market. And I think the Princeton Computer Science Department heard that we were doing this little side course and asked, and there's so many students that really wanted to get into crypto and asked us to co-teach Princeton's first class on applied crypto, Web3, decentralization, whatever you want to call it, which was also a ton of fun. It was the second most applied to class at Princeton this past semester, which was awesome. And I take no credit for that. We didn't do any marketing. It was just literally the hype does, speaks for itself. And so I kind of feel fortunate that I went and actually spent the first year of my entry into crypto really in an academic setting. Right, I went in and try to understand, okay, what's real in this space, what's not real in this space. How do I, separate signal from noise? What are the places that are actually getting real product market fit, or industry market fit? What are the next waves of innovation? And ended up kind of diving into DeFi. DeFi was really exciting to me, and then specifically got pilled on AMM design and all the different things that you can do with automated market makers, decentralized exchanges, and what the next wave of that revolution happens for actually doing exchanges on chain. Long story short, met the folks, the amazing researchers at Bain Capital Crypto. I'd been following a bunch of their papers for a while. Met my two co-founders. We incubated a new company, and here we are a couple months later with Duality.
Amazing. That's the journey is always unique, and to have the time and space to be able to just research and think about this in a puristic way without being part of all the hype and the noise, but being able to really just dig in on a research level, that's unbelievably valuable. So Ron, you've given us a little bit of your background. Talk to me now, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Why is it a compelling problem compared to other problems? And if you guys successfully kind of solve this problem, what's the result? What's the service being provided? How is this impacting the world?
Yeah. I'll explain in a second, but I'll give my frame of mind for how we think about problems in DeFi, or at least how I think of problems in DeFi or Web3 or whatever you want to call it, differently than traditional tech. I think traditional tech, when you're starting a company in traditional tech, you're very good at trying to identify points of friction, right? You're trying to go and say, okay, what is this little instance that doesn't work, and how do I go put a spot solution in there to make it more efficient, more effective, more whatever it may be. In DeFi and really in network design or protocol design, you have the ability to go build incentive systems, right? So the problems that you're solving, of course, need to help people over the long run. And, they have to solve people's real problems and create a better life for your users, for your customers, for your participants. But you have the ability to think much bigger from early on and actually design a system for how a bunch of people work together simultaneously. And so what is Duality? Duality is hitting, what is the ambition here, the long-term ambition, is to build a robust financial system that will be useful 100, 200, 300 years from now, right? Is to build the kind of underpinning for a financial system that is used to go transact money in a healthy and a sustainable and a fair way. Now, kind of why is what we're doing better than all the other ones, and how are we differentiated? The two kind of core values that we're really focusing on at Duality is one, extreme flexibility, right? Extreme flexibility and extreme sustainability. Those are the two values. Flexibility, what we mean by flexibility is that we know that as time goes on and financial markets change, markets are going to go up and down. Different traders, different liquidity providers are going to want to do different types of things. They're going to want to have different types of payoff, different types of distribution, different types of robustness. And what we see is what we want to build is actually give the traders and LPs complete flexibility and power over what type of distribution, payoff, trading style they want to engage with. And that's something that we can do in a way that really no other protocol, no other network, no other chain can do out there with our novel mechanism design, novel incentive structure. The second thing that we want to be is sustainable. One of the things that actually has bothered me most, the more I study both DeFi, but then also the traditional financial system, is you see a lot of instances of things that look closer to get rich quick schemes to long-term like economic structures and big ambitious incentive designs. And what we want to do is actually make sure that we're creating a sustainable economy within our system, right? We don't want to be going and, just like going and pumping and dumping, shilling up and down, creating unsustainable incentive structures across the board. We actually want to make sure that we're structuring things in a sustainable economic fashion. I'm happy to dive deeper into kind of how we're thinking about that. I'm sure we will over the kind of the course of this talk. But those are kind of the two core principles that we think will make for the financial system in 100, 200 years. Extreme flexibility, anyone can go engage however they want. And then sustainability, right? Making sure that, sustainability is not always the sexiest thing to talk about up front, but it's a thing that lasts for, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years over the long run.
This is amazing. Let's approach this then one at a time. Well, let's start with the flexibility piece, and then we'll move to the sustainability piece. So on the flexibility front, what have you seen like existing AMMs, the route they've chosen with flexibility, and what's lacking there? And where is the signal that there's a distinct lack? Where are those customers and those users and those service providers that are saying, I'm not engaging with the system because there's a certain amount of flexibility that I need isn't there, right? So we'll start there. Yeah. Totally.
So I'll kind of tell you what with the small niche part of the market that we talked about, that we actually found initially with Duality. And this is actually came out of a research focus. We started getting increasingly interested in all the different things you can do with LP positions and AMMs. You can go distribute interesting types of like automatically rebalancing curves. You can go create Black-Scholes option models. You can go, replicate power perpetuals. You can go do all this really, really cool stuff with AMMs. And every day another paper comes out and say, you can do this and you can do that and you can do this and you can do that. And we went and talked to teams about how they're going and doing that. And we saw that there were two ways that they went and approached it. Way one was they went in to go and integrate with existing AMMs. Right, so they would go and try to build on UniV3. That was kind of the most common place that they went and built. And every single team we talked to, they spent 6 months, 12 months integrating with UniV3, and they were banging their head against the wall the entire time and saying, "I can't do this. This doesn't work." And these are brilliant teams. These are like 5 quants and 3 software engineers going and trying to figure out how do I integrate into this mechanism design? How do I reason about it? How do I reason about this range liquidity, bit shifted integers, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I'll put a caveat. UniV3 is a brilliant piece of engineering. The Uniswap team is absolutely amazing. It's just not optimized for this specific use case, for the specific use case of integrating and creating custom LP payoffs and AMM distribution.
So building protocols on top of protocols is people are trying to build protocols embedded on top of other protocols, and that protocol wasn't necessarily designed with that type of integration in mind. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
I'm actually reading the history of Uniswap. Is a really interesting and fascinating history, and again, if we end up being the Uniswap team, I would be very, very happy, right? They're a phenomenal team, and I've really created the market in many ways, but we're trying to take it one step further. The second thing that these teams would go and do after integrating with Uniswap is go try to create their own AMM. And they would go and spend months doing all this crazy complicated math, trying to design a custom curve, custom payoffs, distributions. And after going and spending months or years going and doing that, raising venture money on that, they would go try to attract liquidity and would frankly have a hard time, right? Because it's pretty hard to attract liquidity for one specific niche AMM curve, right? I have some sort of specific distribution, some sort of option. It's hard to create actually like a huge ecosystem around that. The insight that we had with Duality is we can actually do everything under one roof in a hyper simple manner, right? If whatever type of AMM curve, whatever type of distribution that you want, we can go and replicate it not in multiple months, but actually with one function call. And over time through our front end, you go and input your function, and we'll go and kind of create that distribution. And so that entire market of like go and spend all this time integrating and going all this time creating your own AMM curve, we can do it in a hyper simple, hyper easy manner.
Fascinating. So you've essentially built a way for people to create curves, like just the exact type of behavior you want to create. It's like we're going to give you that full flexibility, whatever that market looks like, whatever the inputs look like, however you want the outputs to be computed, we're giving you the platform and creativity to allow you to do that, versus something like Uniswap v3 where it wasn't designed for, they're making their curves, they have their default curves in mind, and it's hard to try to plug into their liquidity in really unique ways. It's also probably kind of a fractured user experience too, because like it's hard to advertise some of those niche components. So that's a great starting point. My follow-up question to this then is how do you attract the liquidity with Duality? So you're given this complete, and maybe that's part of the sustainability question. Maybe that's where that next part comes from. But let's assume the assumption we'll make is any sort of curve builder, anyone wants to make like their own market in a really unique and differentiated way, this is the place to be. So everyone starts coming, right? How do you attract the capital out of the gates in terms of incentives? Because it's like one could say, people want deep liquidity to have an excellent trading environment, and liquidity providers want to put their capital with high asset utilization, right, with minimal risk involved, right? So like how do you design that environment? How do you attract that capital?
It's a good question, and then I think you're speaking about the cold start problem that every single type of protocol or anything that attracts liquidity deals with. The way we're thinking about it is there's a few different metrics or kind of forms that we're thinking about it in. One, what we realized when we actually came up with this mechanism design to solve this problem of arbitrary curves is that the mechanism design that we have actually can offer superior prices and higher capital efficiency than really anything you'll see out there in DeFi. So the way that we will go and explain in a very simple way is that you get the full capital efficiency, the full capital efficiency of an order book with the full computational efficiency and flexibility of an AMM. And so what that means is that we can do things like zero slippage swaps on stable assets as long as we have, as long as the kind of the Duality tick has LP capital in there. It means that we can get extremely good prices on volatile assets. So there's all these things that kind of you're getting better prices and a better distribution on Duality that we're working with a bunch of different partners that are interested in tracking liquidity on that. The second thing that we're doing, and that is a kind of critical part of our vision, and actually the reason that we initially moved over to Cosmos, is because we know that a whole bunch of AMMs out there are leaking a ton of value to arbitrageurs, to searchers, to folks around the ecosystem. And so we're actually taking a bunch of steps to go and mitigate that MEV, capturing that and giving it back to LPs. And that's the step that we're doing, that we're kind of taking a big step in the ecosystem. And so our goal over the long run is to say, hey, all this MEV stuff, all this MEV that's being captured by folks that are in essence extracting value from your chain or from your protocol, we want to go capture the profits that come from those value from that. And I'm going to hold off how exactly we're doing that. We'll publish that in a few weeks, and actually give it back to LPs. And the goal here is to actually create a sustainable emissions model, right? Not go and say, okay, let's go create these like crazy inflationary token incentives in order to go incentivize LPs. But actually, as part of the trading that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, we can actually capture profits inherently from within the model and go give it back to liquidity providers on the DEX.
That is fascinating. So I'm going to pose a philosophical question here surrounding this. So when a user makes a trade and slippage is created, and by slippage I mean like there's a change in market price, and there's now a disparity between two markets, right? Ultimately, like, is the user paying for, like, in terms of when the arbor's capturing value, are they capturing it from the user, or are they capturing it from the liquidity provider, in your opinion?
The reality is that it's a combination of both. But the other reality is that the liquidity, in our view, the liquidity providers are the one actually creating the fundamental kind of security and financial structure within the system. And so they're the ones that at this point in Duality's progress that we want to incentivize and we want to keep in. Right? They're the liquidity provider, the one that is locking their capital in, is suffering the impermanent loss on that slippage.
Right. That's fascinating. I won't delve into our side of like how we're thinking about it, but
totally. No, let's like, you know, I would love to async or future podcasts. We can go and like have heavy conversations. But you know, I know we've talked about this in other contexts. We should bring our researchers on board and actually go in, because I was just reading. I was like skimming over your guys' new your new white paper, and it's you guys are doing some really cool stuff.
The interesting part is we have some self arbitrage mechanisms. It's interesting because we're biasing our mechanism towards the user, that arbitrage value that's left on the table towards the user making the trade, versus the liquidity. Like, well, before it's all just value left on the table. So I think we're already part of the next generation of AMMs that are like, wait a second, like that value should just be given up to an external actor. Like that should be captured by the system. That's just a part of sustainability. But you're biasing it towards the liquidity provider. We're biasing it towards user. But even during this conversation, I'm like, wait a second. I think you're right. There is a balance. What does that balance look like? Just fascinating stuff. So
and it's not clear. And I think this is like what we're hitting now is the frontier of AMM.
Yep.
Right. Like what we've seen over the past, like, you know, if you take like kind of a brief history of AMMs, right? Uniswap came out with UniV1, UniV2, which was a deceivingly simple thing that worked like crazily, right? It worked it was computationally efficient on chain, a way to create markets in a computationally efficient on chain manner. Brilliant, amazing. Then there was a whole wave of additional innovations on top of that said, okay, wait, let's solve some of the like easy low-hanging fruit problems here, right? Like we have to make it a little bit more capital efficient. We have to make it better for other types of assets. Like, you know, Curve came up for stables, Contra Liquidity, UniV3 came up for capital efficiency purposes. And now I think the frontier of AMM design is actually how do we dynamically reallocate value in healthier ways? And I think teams like ours are the ones that are dealing with that, right? And like, you know, we have, by the way, you know, our bias also comes from our mechanism design. Our bias comes from the fact that, you know, a lot of our core innovations outside of extreme capital efficiency and great prices for traders, a lot of our core innovations comes from, hey, you know, go distribute any arbitrary AMM curve. And that's a really attractive proposition to vault managers, to liquidity providers, to institutional traders. And so, you know, at this point, those are the ones that we're going and saying, hey, like, you know, come to our platform. There's a real positive sum game to be played here. But excited for the future of that conversation as well.
It's so fascinating because like when you have the flexibility to make any curve, any distribution, then ultimately it's your market makers in the form of liquidity providers that get to choose which risk profile they'd like within any given curve design. So like one of the problems current AMMs face is like, oh, like I have this one capital efficient curve, but as you know, like there's a trade-off to capital efficiency when the further you get away from equilibrium, right? Then the pools are at risk of entering into a very wonky state, and arbitrage helps us bring us back to equilibrium. But like what you're saying is, hey, we don't need to solve for like, you know, one curve or 10 curves. We need to create the full flexibility for the people with the capital and the ones making the markets to decide what risk profile they want to choose within that curve design, which makes total sense. It's super cool.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point. And you know, we're excited to see the new design space that comes up from that. Right, because you know we're kind of challenging the way that people think about how to go distribute liquidity on AMMs, which we're really pumped about. And the other form here is that you hit upon a really good point as well, is that we're kind of talking very negatively now about arbitrageurs and searchers and all that stuff. These guys play a really important role in ensuring financial markets, right? And to make sure that, you know, the price on my AMM and the price on your AMM and the price on the other guy's AMM are all the same, and we're actually kind of creating an infrastructure for that. And that's fine. And we want a ton of them to come to Duality and go engage on Duality and go use Duality. But we also want to make sure that we're out. Again, the frontier AMM question is, how do we reallocate value in effective manner? That's the question. The question is not who are the players. The players are clear. The players are clear here. It's a question of how to actually reallocate value in an intelligent manner and encourage the market structure that you want to create.
Amazing. Super interesting. So we've talked about the flexibility side, although ironically the flexibility conversation automatically gets tied into the sustainability conversation. They're both intimately intertwined. So walk me through your view of sustainability, because I think one of the fundamental problems of AMMs today, and this could be tied to the fact that there's been a limited number of curves that have been allowed to be created, and fundamentally we exist in a space where people are willing to emit value at a rate that isn't sustainable. So it's like you have a sustainable project competing with a project that's willing to be unsustainable in the act of acquiring users, right? That's like the fundamental battle that kind of exists there, is user acquisition. Yep. So walk me through what does it mean to build a sustainable system in a space that you're competing against other yields that by definition aren't sustainable because they are emitting more value than revenue that is being generated on that curve, right? That's the problem that will kill you over time when the expense is greater than the revenue for the protocol. Fundamentally, that's unsustainable.
Totally, and that's an important. You kind of have described the like crisis of the commons problem that we see in AMMs and decentralized exchanges and crypto in general right now, right? You have, and like this is also the story that like I actually really like about Cosmos. I'm kind of taking on a slight tangent, then I'll come back. The story that I really like about Cosmos, and actually Nick White from Celestia had a great tweet about this the other day that we really like, is that like there's this cycle of and we can also articulate this to kind of DEX and protocol design. There's a cycle of L1s that pop up, right? L1 pops up, raises a huge amount of VC money, pumps out incentives of the ecosystem. You get millions of dollars in grants to go build like, just like literally fork all the other really real innovations that are happening elsewhere onto this L1. It goes up and up and up and up. Investors cash out, founders cash out, then all goes back down, right? Like that's the reality that we're seeing. And then, there's always the new L1 and the new L1 and the new L1. And the reality is that I think there's 3 ecosystems in crypto right now that are not get rich quick, but get rich slow, get rich really, really slow. I think they're Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cosmos. And those are all ecosystems that have never really done this like crazy, 100, 200, 500, 900% APY model to go get up, but actually just created series of 0 to 1 innovations and really pushed the status quo, created true communities and believers around themselves that were able to come in, that were willing to come in and experiment and play and actually come out with new stuff on top. So Cosmos, that's actually, one of the other reasons we were very excited about Cosmos is that Cosmos, I think I identified with that mentality. It's the one that it like, and Duality is also very much adopting this perspective that we're okay being patient, right? We're okay coming in and saying, okay, from day 0, we're not going to go and like offer 900% APYs to every single trader and get a bunch of mercenary capital that frankly just dries up over time. Yep. Right? Like it's really nice to go attract capital through incentives, but they're there because of the incentives.
Yep.
Right? But if we can actually go create healthy financial markets, do it from the ground up, find the first use cases, the real design partners that are excited. Hey, whoa, I can do this on your AMM curve. I can go create this type of financial product. Wait. You're saying I can my coin can be listed in this manner. It can be traded in this manner with this type of product sold to this institution. Like the technology and the new perspectives that we're bringing are what we're really excited about when we're bringing new partners to go build on us, to go engage with us. And we're okay if it takes, longer, because we know that if you do it right, if you stick to it over a longer period of time, like the trend doesn't go like this, or the wave doesn't go like this. It just goes like this.
You're essentially looking for capital that they want to create a specific market, and they are willing to incur the risk on their own without like incentives from a system in many ways. That would be like true sustainability. Is like they like the market they've created, they understand their own risks they've created, and then it's about them attracting trading volume to it ultimately.
Yeah, and they're attracted to us because of our fundamentally new technology and approach, right? In the way that they can do things on Duality that they can't do elsewhere.
Yep.
But we're looking for we're not looking for. We have true design partners, true believers that are working with us on day 0 to figure out what can we do on this ecosystem and platform. And kind of the more people we talk to, the more we bring into our community and into our ecosystem.
So we've talked about the history of AMMs a bit. We've talked about what it means to have Duality's approach to flexibility, Duality's approach to sustainability and its time horizon. Let's now maybe transition the conversation about DeFi versus TradFi. For a project such as yourself that is this zoomed out, I'm assuming you have conviction about the friction points in TradFi that you believe that DeFi solves for. So what is Duality's view on what does it mean to onboard Web 2 into Web 3? Why will mom and pops, or maybe not mom and pops, why would an institution decide Duality is the place for me as opposed to some sort of centralized exotic market that they've decided to spin up elsewhere that's centralized?
Totally. So I'll give you my structure at a high level, and I'll actually give you kind of another somewhat hot take that we have around this stuff. So in general, TradFi, hyper efficient markets, right? Like that is the thing that makes the hyper efficient markets. There's regulatory moat there. A whole bunch of existing kind of value creating assets sit in traditional financial ecosystems. Traditional finance is also opaque and entrenched and super unclear. And all the things that crypto people are going and actually believing in over the long run. The fundamental beliefs that we have are things around openness to anyone, are things about kind of true competitions on every single level of the stack, equality of opportunity, that you and I, young people that kind of care about changing the world in some form and want to go build the next layer of finance, don't need to be sitting in the right room at Goldman to go and do that. With that permissionless nature. In terms of how TradFi comes into DeFi, I think I answer a lot of questions like this. There's two sides to it. First of all, there's major steps we need to take in order to to just make it easier for folks to onboard into the ecosystem, right? The UX needs to improve much better. Real distribution needs to be much more effective. You have to create the right systems that are not complicated, that are not hard to integrate with, that are actually easy to understand. The other side of it is I think it's actually going to take a while before we figure out what the killer app for crypto is. Right? You and I both spent a lot of time in the ecosystem. I think how I frame it in my mind is that there's 4 fundamental reasons that people spend time in crypto. 1, they're interested in tech. 2, they care about some sort of value, right? We'll call it privacy, security, openness, democratization. They want to be part of a big, if true, movement, or they think they can make a quick buck. Often some combination of the 4. It's important to note that none of those reasons are because the technology, or very rarely do you see I'm spending time in crypto because the technology has uniquely enabled something that has totally changed my life. Right? There's not an aha moment that oh my God, the first time I picked up an iPhone. Or the addiction you might have to Instagram or TikTok, the seamlessness you felt the first time you're on Robinhood. No, there are very few people you talk to that are whoa, I've used this crypto thing and it's completely changed everything. But the reality is that what crypto is trying to do is actually try to build an entire backend for the financial world. And these things take a really long time. And so the people that come in are the people who are attracted of this by this vision of the backend for the financial world. And along the way, we go create all these different assets and all these different projects and all these different perspectives on how this financial world is created that people go and bet on, right? Go and say, hey, I believe in your asset and I believe in your project and I believe in your direction. I'm willing to come into it. So the 2 prongs of my answer here are 1, in order to onboard traditional finance, you need much better distribution, you need much better UX. But in order to truly run the world's financial system on crypto, it's going to take more time. We're not ready for it yet. Right, DeFi was only came up as a concept a couple years ago, right? And we saw in this past bull and bear cycle, the first real test of it, of some of the newest protocols, and you and I are talking about value redistribution and DeFi, that's the frontier. It's not that's still low hanging fruit, right? And so we still need a couple more years, if not more, to go and say. What will it take to go run the world's finance on this? To go list stocks, to list equities, to go list, every single asset that exists in the world on chain, and that we've created the right infrastructure for. So hopefully that answers the question. I know that you're talking about traditional finance, web finance, it kind of went in a lot of different directions, but that's kind of my general perspective on this stuff.
No, I think it's a great answer. It essentially points out, all right, what are the known knowns that we know can be fixed? And it's UI, UX, onboarding, distribution, all this, that's a very, very clear. That's a clear answer.
Yeah.
But if we're going to compare DeFi to TradFi, it's such a youthful concept. It's so fresh and new that there's so many unknowns about where decentralized finance will be in a decade that it's hard to make a comparison at this precise moment, because most of us are aspiring to certain attributes and to a certain vision, but it's how much will the fundamental constraints of the technology stop us or accelerate us to actually achieve it? So it's just hard to know. It's unmapped.
Let me give you another interesting perspective on it, is that I'm actually we're writing a little paper now about the regulatory impact of AMMs and how AMMs should be addressed from a regulatory perspective. You can read a really interesting speech by Gary Gensler, or actually a series of speeches by him over the past couple months, where he goes and attacks traditional financial institutions. And goes and says, hey, the market structures here don't work. There's payment for order flow is a misincentivized system. You have issues with order by order competition, best execution prices, all these kind of traditional financial words that in essence, go to say, hey, traditional financial markets are hurting retail investors.
Yep.
Crypto has a lot of the answers for that, right? With an AMM, with either of our AMMs, we can go guarantee that you're getting the price of best execution. With our new question around how do we capture value and reallocate value, you're in essence challenging the paradigm of payment for order flow. You're making it an incentive aligned model. There's no such thing as like lack of order by order competition in crypto markets. Every order is auctioned off individually in a totally composable manner. There's no opaque, all these things that actually crypto solves, right? People ask like, what are those problems crypto solving? Crypto solving this stuff. And so that's the kind of guiding light for me on like, okay, we need to keep thinking about how to make markets better, continue iterating on how to create better market structures. And if we do it right and people bet on us as projects, we create the right UX, we create the right distribution, then as time goes on, we will actually prove ourselves as just a better place to go run the global financial system.
I love it. I think that's oftentimes in our space you get so, and I say this as someone who's been in this space now for over half a decade now, like you lose, it's easy to lose track of the flaws of centralized finance, as in like there's very tangible real inefficiencies in there beyond just like attributes, right. It's like there's actual problems there that their technology fundamentally wasn't necessarily designed to solve for in a completely opaque or like transparent and fair programmatic manner. So it's always very like re-encouraging to like reframe things and be like, no, like we legitimately have the technology here to make a better system than centralized finance from multiple angles.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, that's all I got. Let's go.
I had this is a kind of framework that I've adopted as well, but I had a mentor of mine go explain it to me in this way, go frame it in this way. And this guy was kind of like very high up at Coinbase and was like an OG in the space, but also ran a couple of banks before that. And his perspective was he said, up until now, the internet revolution that we've seen has been primarily a front-end revolution, right? It has been a way to actually go interface with the existing systems that we've created in more efficient, better distributed ways, right? Most of the technologies that we use are better interfaces for going, especially interfacing with complex systems, right? Like, the whole fintech revolution that you see are better interfaces for finance, which, by the way, is amazing. I don't want to undersell that, right? Like that, and it's changed the world in 100 ways over. Crypto is doing a very different thing. Crypto is a back-end revolution, right? Crypto is trying to go and build the like incentive structures, like new incentive structures from the ground up. And doing that takes much longer, right? Because going back to the thing that we said earlier, like you can't just find a friction point. You need to actually create a system.
Yep.
And second, it requires new ways of thinking, right? It requires actually thinking about like, how does everything work together in ways? How do I create incentive systems and structures? And how do I think adversarially instead of like going and shipping? Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent.
So good. This is such quality content. I love the discourse. So I think I have one big question I have left on here, and then maybe we'll aim to close things out. What is the role of stable coins in this vision of better financial piping, and specifically how Duality's vision? What's the role of stablecoins on Duality long term in your opinion?
Totally. So role of stablecoins in general in crypto is very easy, right? You can't have a crypto economy where you don't have a stable store of value, right? And frankly, right now the U.S. dollar has become the predominant store of value in crypto, and that's okay, right? There's other stablecoins coming up for other national currencies. There's attempts at creating crypto native stable coins with assets that are more that are less volatile. That's fine, but you can't have any type of economy without a natural store, without a stable store of value. And so for the vast majority of economies, they're the natural denomination, and the way that people think about pricing. They're a critical part of the operation. Similar for Duality, right? Similar for Duality in the economy that we're creating. They become the underpinning, and they would become the underpinning of our whole operation. One of the really nice parts of Duality and how our MEC design is structured is that we can do zero, as long as there's enough LP capital in the specific pools, we can do zero slippage swaps on stablecoins. And I know a lot of times people say zero slippage swaps, and you're like, wait, are you like compensating me from some weird incentive model, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? No, if we have the right LP partners that go, concentrate their liquidity at the 1-to-1 price for let's say Silk and USDC, then you get zero slippage on those swaps. And so that's a really great like service that we hope to offer from day zero to the ecosystem to just have a really capital efficient market for stablecoins. Going back right now, Cosmos is missing. There's a missing stablecoins are missing from Cosmos, and if we accept the premise that stablecoins are the underpinning for crypto economies, then it's hard to build a crypto economy in Cosmos without having robust and strong stablecoins. And I'm incredibly happy that there's a couple of amazing projects like you guys popping up and saying like, okay, we want to go introduce that, right? And of course, Circle and USDC are coming to Cosmos, and there's a revolution coming in a couple months where we and Cosmos are finally going to have that underpinning, and then that is the kind of fundamental infrastructure with which we build on top of that, and we hope that Duality can be a meager services provider on that to offer exchanges of those coins, and just create markets with our partners, with our liquidity providers and our ecosystem, in a manner that just gives traders the best prices.
It triggers an idea in my head, like even like our arbitrage conversation, and even just for whatever reason, but it feels like protocols at some point will be making their own markets for themselves in a very like cohesive way. Like it seems like one stablecoin protocol could have a very unique relationship with another stablecoin protocol where they very much trust each other. They're accepting the assumptions of each other's model, and therefore we can go and create like a very zero slippage market because of that trusted relationship. And then that's like
music my ears. Yeah.
The other side of it too is like I think the on the arbitrage side you could follow a very similar concept where we're probably going to have many. I mean, it depends on your view of how much liquidity will get concentrated at any given protocol, but it's like there's also beyond arbitrage that happens within interdex or inter L1. There's also external arbitrage, but if everyone starts capturing their own arbitrage for themselves, then I'm really curious to see how those relationships evolve between protocol. Like how do the pricing markets evolve when everyone's capturing the arbitrage for themselves? What does it mean then to correct between DEXs, and could you have really interesting relationships between those protocols? So those are just two thoughts.
I'll say a few things, and we could have another 3-hour conversation about this topic. But the two things that are worth noting, we are huge believers in IBC, and we think that IBC was this like gift from the finality gods that is still a really early piece of technology. Right? There's still like there's a lot of opportunities that are incredibly unexplored with IBC that can enable a lot of the things that we're talking about right now. And how do we create cross-chain markets, cross-chain liquidations, cross-chain arbitrage, et cetera, to go actually create create these markets against kind of the IBC and across the IBC and Interchain economy. We're making a lot of investments internally on that. A lot of time spent about what building the next generations of IBC and thinking about what the future of that economy looks like. The other thing that's worth noting is again, these are unsolved questions. I'm not the expert to talk about this, but just like how all these different like MEV captures and providers coming up play into creating cross-chain atomicity in a cross-chain economy will be really interesting to see. We're really close with and love the guys at Skip, and like teams like theirs have really cool opportunities to go do something, to go do some really big things and actually kind of take IBC to the next level. And I guess the final note I'll say, and the other reason that really happy we're having this conversation, that we're happy that we're in Cosmos at all, we're also huge bulls on app-specific infrastructure, right? And I think that one of the things that we're learning as time goes on is that there's some apps that are going to be great on generalized purpose chains. Some things that are maybe more user focused, less focused on every possible optimization. But we're a very EVM focused team. The team we have, and we came into Cosmos. Once you actually have control of the full stack, the design space opens up really significantly.
Yes.
And even that is a really nascent ideology, right? Like this whole app chains are the first ones only launched a couple years ago. There's now the conversations about rollups and about modularity and about folks like Eigenlayer and Celestia and Fuel doing some cool stuff there. And so it's all just kind of ties back into like our larger perspective on this. That it's I know that it's something everyone in crypto said, but it's early, right? Like these things are these markets and technologies evolve over not long periods of time, actually really short periods of time. But these are, everything from IBC to app-specific infrastructure, we're in the early days of it. Like the problems we're dealing with are still the absolute lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, I think one of my hot takes is like the one problem with having such a large design space is like the more you attempt to do with that design space, the larger your attack surface. It's just like
totally.
A fundamental property of open source code tied to extremely lucrative financial incentives to break things. It's like I'm so pumped about the expanded design space of like, from our perspective, I think stuff Shade Protocol is most excited about is the inter-primitive design space when all of them are working together in really permissioned, unique ways. But when we talk about like expanded design space from like a full tech stack perspective, I'm like, you're 100% right, and you can, and you know, a good analogy would maybe be like a C++. Like you can like really laser in and get exact, precise performance, but then it's like the operator creating that, you could have some sort of memory leaks that are vulnerable and can like really break everything. So larger design space, more attack space. It makes me nervous and excited at the same time. That's what I would say.
Our engineers are coming every day and saying like, wait, but what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And like, and frankly, they're right? Like in the way that things are being built right now, the technologies are invented, but like how did this happen in Ethereum world? Yep. Ethereum was launched, and then some lunatic in the corner went and said, but what if this attack would happen? And then everyone was like, no, that's like so esoteric and no one would care about that. And then it happened, right? And then it became a core part, of like building Ethereum apps, building Ethereum products. And that happened 5 or 6 times over, and continues to happen, frankly. Yep. And then the ecosystem learns from it. And I think the thing that I like wish that we're doing internally, and that I think Cosmos is actually doing quite well, and I hope continues to happen, is that when people come up with like these esoteric attacks that are like, wait, but what if this situation were to happen? The more money gets locked into Cosmos, and the more money that flows in here, which we're quite confident given the trajectory and of the ecosystem that will happen, the more likely all of those, the more likely and the more profitable all of those attacks become. And so we really, as an ecosystem, need to be hyper focused on again, taking the I hate to say it, like the kind of get rich slow approach, move methodologically, move thoughtfully, and actually think about like the incentive structure, the full incentive structures that we're creating.
100%. I think what's fascinating about the attack surface is it's beyond just implementation attack vectors. Like there's also economic attack vectors. Like I actually view Lido on Ethereum as an attack vector, right? Like that's like a legitimate attack vector on security. The commoditization of convenience tied to earning yield and securing underlying layer 1 can centralize economic capital in a way that controls a chain that's fundamentally different from the original governance token. So it's like, that's why it's just like, and actually Cosmos, I think Cosmos and staking derivatives is going to be like really fascinating to watch, because it's like the Ethereum experiment, but like multiplied by like 1,000 over the course of the next decade, and all of them interacting with each other and all having their own security attack vectors, economic. So it's going to be fun.
It's exciting
and
it's terrifying.
It's just going to be like, I guess my other concern is like the IBCs. Like, so one thing to your point, like the more you standardize across like different concepts like Cosmos SDK, IBC, it's like if they're safe implementations, wow, that is powerful, right? Unbelievably powerful. But if something breaks in one of those standardized implementations, the network effect is exponentially worse than like, hey, I'm a permission chain with my weird standard, and I can protect myself, like Binance, for instance, like the Binance bridge break. They had the fraud proof that went through where they mimicked a fraud proof, and it was like IBC had to like relook at its standard, re-audit itself, and be like, oh frick, stuff like this actually might be possible here. And so that's what my prediction for Cosmos is like, if Cosmos pulls off this dream of standardization on the Cosmos SDK, CosmWasm, and IBC, and it just keeps improving without catastrophe over the course of the next decade, that is like the 10th wonder of the world.
Huge.
It's actually insane if that gets pulled off. My prediction is that's not the case, and it's very concerning to think about the ramifications of a decentralized standard where chains can't just be like, we're going to shut this off, because it's like so integrated into everything. So it's these are all experiments, and I'm excited to have the standards push forward. It's just there's risks with standardization too.
We're on the same page there. It's something that like excites me on the one hand, but also like terrifies me and everyone on the team of like what and it's not, actually interesting to think about like how these are like conversations I had like 2 days ago with the team of like how do we think about this stuff, right? We can either be like boomer chain and like like just say like, okay, we're gonna take like every single possible like protective vector and make sure that like no one can attack us, but like and then just understand that we're never going to be working with anyone ever, right?
Yep.
Like that's kind of option 1. Or we can just say like, screw it. let's go. We're going to be playing in the same game that everyone else is playing in, and in the same ecosystem. But that also means that we're opening up ourselves up to the same attack vectors. And of course, like, it's not always it's such a clear dichotomy. There's things that you can do within your chain and who you connect to and how you structure implementations to kind of take the relevant precautions. But at the end of the day, there is kind of a dichotomy, right? Like, once you're participating in the standard, then you're in it, right? Like, you're a part of the story. You're a part of the ecosystem.
Yep. Amazing. Well, Ron, this has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you about Duality, and more than that, really just a very nuanced conversation about the state of AMMs, state of Cosmos. Like, we touched on so many different things. I just want to cede the floor to you. This is your chance to look into the camera, talk to your Duality community. That, like, we recorded this video before Duality was even public, so this is your first chance to look into the camera. These are people that have just learned about you. How can they join? How can they be part of the vision? The floor is yours.
Totally. So first and foremost, follow us on Twitter at DualityXYZ. But most important, if you're interested in being a liquidity provider, if you're a vault manager, if you're just interested in the future of AMM design and all the different things that you can do with different curves, and the future of kind of all these conversations that we're having around MEV, around AMMs, reach out. We're always happy to have a conversation. We're thinking every single day about some of the most interesting problems in the space at House. We're a couple months away from our public launch, but we're building a community from day zero of folks, some of the smartest folks in the industry that want to work with us. And so, if that's interesting to you, talk to us. We'd love to work with you.
Amazing. This was Into the Interchain with Ron from Duality. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and